I love this show by Wendover Productions. Super informative show I usually watch on Sunday evenings, winding down and getting ready for the week ahead. The most recent one, named The Downfall of Southwest Airlines, really resonated with me as I continue on my journey of understanding real business resilience, specifically with managing risk. This episode showcased something called Cascading risk dependencies that I'm going to dive into in today's episode of Threat Thursday. Cascading risk dependencies are just what you think they sound like. If one risk is realized, it can have a knock-on effect to another and another, just like dominoes. We are about to uncover three major cascading risks that brought Southwest Airlines to their knees. 4 p.m., 21st of December 2022. Winter Storm Elliott descended on Denver and the temperature plunged from 42, which is 5 degrees in Celsius, to 5 or minus 15 Celsius in 1 hour. The overnight went to minus 31 and the daytime was minus 21 Celsius, which put a halt to all outbound flights. So here comes the first domino, and it wasn't actually the third party at fault. While other airlines had third-party contractors to provide de-icing for their planes, Southwest had an internal team with inadequate equipment and just could not manage the cooler conditions. At this exact point in time, all other airlines were already mitigating their risk out to an experienced vendor that specifically focuses on the issue of de-icing. So they had their planes ready for takeoff later that day, while Southwest did not. This then caused the second domino to start to fall. SkySolver, the second domino, an off-the-shelf product developed by a company called Caleb Technology Corp, since bought by GE Aviation, that was heavily modified and maintained by Southwest. Now, Southwest didn't operate a hub and spoke system like all other airlines. And with all this disruption of the flight cancellation and delays caused by the de-icing, the software could not keep up and just broke down. In normal circumstances, it took 25 minutes to provide a new solution for a cancelled or delayed flight. That morning, Southwest had over 100 delays or cancellations, which again had a cascading effect on the updates required, and the software just stopped working, eventually forcing the employees to return to manual operations of getting the national fleet back in the air using pen and paper. This triggered the final domino, the call center for crew and pilots. The Dallas HQ ran 2 employees. The call center just couldn't handle the task of hundreds of calls and logistics of getting the crew to the locations after all the disruption. All in, Southwest had 15,000 flight cancellations over a week, which add up to $1.5 billion loss, which included fines, reimbursements, hotel accommodations, and more. The video goes on to a complete downfall. But had this storm been predicted and the cascading risk mitigations put in place, what could have happened? A company should always complete a risk assessment of their critical business processes and identify the risks involved in each part of that process, and then provide mitigating actions to each part of the risk. In this scenario, I believe the following items could have completely changed the entire outcome of Southwest and might help you in your business. What does Southwest do? They fly customers from one destination to another in planes. So therefore, any disruption to the business process that affects that is critical. What can stop planes from flying? Should be the first question asked. Well, there are a list of risks. But let's start with the risk that could ground a number of planes, not just one. A fuel crisis, staff strike, terrorist attack, or natural disaster. We can list them all and rank them of likelihood, and then add a column for mitigation and indicators which will change that risk. Weather is the one we're really going to dig into. What will shut down an airport? What conditions, or in this scenario, temperature thresholds, need to be met? Then, what do you do if they are met? And can your de-icing team work in those conditions? What are their thresholds? And what does your competition have in place that might be better than yours? In this case, all the competitors used a supplier that was superior. And while it might have cost more, it was outsourced and a proven solution. Based on the thresholds, the likelihood of ever having a storm such as that was very low. The minus 24 low on December 22 was Denver's coldest temperature in 32 years. And based on my research of companies' released financials, competitor analysis, industry averages, internal de-icing operations was saving the company approximately $82 million a year, which again is a significant amount. However, it's not larger than the $1.5 billion it cost them. And the storm, while improbable, still had happened within the board's lifetime, which means the risk was real. It needed to be identified and mitigations needed to be put in place for it. Had they negotiated a failover deal with the de-icing contractors for the eventuality or upgraded their equipment, this could have been a probable mitigation. In my opinion, with a lot of hindsight, the first domino could have been avoided. However, the delays still could have knocked over domino 2. Software connected to flight logistics. If that software fails, what are the parameters of that? And work back from that. We already know it took 25 minutes to reroute a flight. You know that you only have 24 hours in a day, and quick math will show a maximum of 57 flight recalculations a day. So in a situation where more than 57 flights would be delayed or cancelled, the system would be overwhelmed, much like traffic on a Black Friday to a website. These things can be and should be tested. Denver cancelled 2,348 flights on the 28th of December. Once the risk of 57 flights a day was identified, the immediate task would be to identify a way to scale this operation and test it in simulation. In 2021, Southwest had 2,000 cancelled or delayed flights over the year, which is an average of 5.5 a day. They would then have to look at the main location for the delays and identify their worst day. From that data, they should have accurate numbers. If they then found out they needed 57 calculations a day and only for 14 hours of that day, they would need a system to run 20x the speed. They could have mitigated a huge amount of losses. From this point, it would have been a discovery and analysis of the software to see possible solutions to scale it up and align it with cost and time. My research, based on company release financials and public knowledge of software costs, industry related costs, is that the costing of Southwest around $96 million a year. They later said they would be spending $500 million upgrading their software after this incident. If they had spent the $500 million earlier, they might have mitigated the risk. The call center was the final nail in the coffin when falling back to pen and paper. In an emergency, how many calls can one employee manage from start to end? The call center stats could have been pulled and another simulation could have been run for the surge. Another opportunity to outsource the extra load if needed, and at least divert traffic, categorize and prioritize, and get on top of a bad situation. I did some research based on industry standards, competitor analysis, and release financials, and estimated the crew call center was costing less than $1 million a year to run, with 2 employees mentioned in numerous articles. This could have been outsourced for scale, at my estimate, been run for potentially $2 million a year, which is 4 times greater. However, last line of defense and a fraction of the percentage increase for overall operational costs. The total risk coverage cost would have been annually $100 million extra every year. In 2019, Southwest total operating expenses were just under $20 billion. So that would have taken them to just over $20 billion to save a potential $1.5 billion, and what could have fatally injured the company forever. All in all, hindsight is 2020, and it's much easier to point out how to fix something that is already broken. That's the entire point of risk though. Assess what the risk is and what mitigations are in place to create residual risk you're willing to accept. I don't know everything about the situation, but from what I've researched, outsourcing the risk on the wings, software, and call center could have changed the catastrophe for Southwest. And yes, even if the team did highlight the risks and the potential losses, when a company's making that much money, the shareholders are enjoying the profits they were, it's very hard to get the money to create fixes for something that might never happen. Resilience is not an overnight success. And it's not a broke, don't fix it mindset. It's about balance, looking at what is acceptable and generous profits and preparing for the potential risks and betting on the company's future, not its past success. Spend some time on your business processes and identifying the critical areas and vendors and ranking potential outcomes. It might one day be your saving grace.